How's it going, everyone? Intern Joe back with you for episode 2 of the Hard Fowl. As always, I'm joined by my co-host, the godfather of greatness, Collyn Taylor. Collyn, how we doing, good sir?
I am great. Coming off a fantastic weekend. I was at a wedding all weekend. I was one of the groomsmen. My first time, I think, ever being a groomsman. So that was an interesting experience, kind of getting to, I'm obviously married, but I got to experience being a groomsman for the first time. And it's a lot of drinking apple juice and hanging out and just telling you where to go. So that's where we are, and got to watch a little bit, catch up on the game today. And Jack Velcher did a great job holding down the fort for me while I was gone. And tough day, but a lot of finger guns. Have you ever done groomsman work before?
I have not. I have served a wedding. I have not done groomsman work. I've been in weddings, like, usher and that kind of thing, but no groomsman work.
Yes. Groomsman work is being best man is pretty, there's some more oomph to it. And groomsman work, it's kind of being asked to do so. Your role as a groomsman is determined by the groom in terms of what you need to have done and all this. So it's a lot of fun, and we got to kind of hang out, and it's all dependent on the group of dudes you're with. So was in my first wedding that wasn't my own, and I'll get to be I'm in at least one more this year.
Let's go.
So we're ready. We're ready for it. It's that time where a lot of your friends are getting married. So
absolutely.
Yeah, this is probably the better than talking about the men's basketball.
Men's basketball, man. It's going to be a tough segue, believe me.
Yeah, that's when we get paid the big bucks.
Yeah, exactly. But Collyn, tell us who the show is brought to us by.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm still getting used to the sponsor aspect of it, but as you can see up at the top here, I'm pointing to it. It's the title sponsor for everything Gamecock Live over the course of everything. Clint Hammond of the Movement Mortgage Network. Clint sponsors everything. Big old Gamecock fan, big fan of Gamecock Central. You see all of his stuff there. Presenting sponsor, loves to talk Gamecock sports. You see his NMLS number right there. You can always reach out to him at Hammond at the Mortgage Network. We're kind of getting into the time and period where you start thinking about buying a house. You start thinking about some of that stuff, and who better to start the process with you than Clint? Call him up, really get to know the mortgage and housing market, and see if he can't help you either buy or sell one of your homes.
Absolutely. As always, our friend Clint Hammond making this thing possible. Collyn, I guess, where do we start? I guess we can start with the weekend. We can start with Florida. I mean, a lot of places to start and not a lot of pretty ones.
I'll say this about Florida, because there's really not a whole lot you can say when you lose by, 20 or 15 points, 20 points, something like that. It's just not, or 21 points. It's just not good right now. And South Carolina played a really energetic first half. You're right there going through some of this stuff. You're back and forth. You're making some shots. You're forcing some misses. You get it within 6 with, I guess, 18, 17 minutes to go. You're right there to make a run and make something happen. And then Florida ends up scoring 12 of the next 14 points. The lead's back up to 16, and you're just cooked at that point, and you can't recover from it. And it turns into another lopsided loss. Defense was not great. Offense was not great down the stretch. And then you go into Georgia, and you're leading for large chunks of that game. You were up at half. You were up double digits with 10 minutes to go, and you can't hold on. And it marks what's been an incredibly frustrating stretch of South Carolina basketball, and even more frustrating look here, because it was right there for you. Like, you're going into a stretch where Florida's okay, but they're not great, and Georgia was incredibly beatable, and you just don't. You had every opportunity to, but you just couldn't make it happen. And that was just tough, man. Just once once Georgia tied it up and they had all the momentum going down the stretch, it was going to be hard for South Carolina to really do anything.
Yeah, absolutely. That Georgia game was brutal, and I mean they had it for the majority of the game, and we saw, I mean, good things from all aspects, during that game and throughout it, and it's just like this team has had they've been really good at not being able to string good play together throughout the entire game, right? Like we've seen really, really, really good stuff in spots, and then we're like, okay, maybe this is going to be fixed for the stretch and stuff, and then all of a sudden, after a timeout or after a stoppage, it just disappears. And the thing that I'm thinking of the most that I saw in the Georgia game, because again, the Florida game is just a tough one. You can't really pull anything from that. But the thing I saw the most from Georgia was like, Lamont talked about it Thursday in his Collyn show too, is they get backdoored quite a lot on defense. And they tightened it up there to start the second half, and the defense looked good. Georgia wasn't shooting the ball. They kind of got in their heads a little bit, got out to a little 12-point lead there, and it was just like you would think they'd tighten it down, going down into the final minutes. But I don't know. Georgia turned it up, and the defense kept getting backdoored. I don't know if it's because they were tired or just lost focus, but I mean the backdoor cuts are just there for everyone that they're playing, and I just, it frustrates me because like playing back, like the backdoor cuts are always a frustrating thing. And to hear Lamont talk about it on Thursday as like a big area of focus, and then they lost it, right? Yeah. They just lost the effort there on the backdoor cuts and stuff. And that was the most glaring thing to me, that, it's such a simple fundamental that Lamont has obviously been preaching about and like was talking about. And then, they just lost it there down the stretch. And I mean, when you have only one timeout going down the stretch like they did, you're not really going to have a lot of time to regroup. And so I think it's a mix of two. One, they were, tired going down that stretch, and two, they just, the lack of communication. And it's hard to get on the same page when you have long stretches of time, when you're not in a huddle, when you don't have a timeout. And Georgia knew that too. Mm-hmm. Georgia played to that. They knew that, the Gamecocks haven't been in a huddle for a while, so they knew that the communication was dying. Their run started to build up and up and up, so they took advantage of it. And I just think, game management a little bit from Lamont with the timeouts and all of that, and then obviously the backdoor cuts, the communication was the biggest glaring thing for me from Georgia. Collyn,
think about how many of those like oop plays that Georgia ran, especially in the second half, where because Georgia was trying to get downhill because the refs were calling just about everything. They're trying to get downhill. You got a guy stepping up, even though you can say, hey, watch the back door, watch the back door. You got a guy trying to step up and stop this drive, and then all of a sudden a big rotates or a wing rotates, and it's a boom, alley-oop dunk. And like you said, Georgia was playing to that. They knew that was kind of like their first look on some sets where the guy just got to the high elbow, and the guy of South Carolina's defense rotated in, and all of a sudden it's boom, an oop play. And they ran that down the stretch like it was, nothing. And it was just it's so frustrating because South Carolina's up 10 or 12 points or whatever it was in the second half. And for a good while there, it was Georgia would come on a run and South Carolina would immediately answer with a bucket. Or, Georgia would go on like a 4-0 spurt and South Carolina would hit a 3 to kind of stymie the run. And they found ways to make some tough shots early. They found ways to, really make it and keep Georgia at arm's length. And then the press happened. And it's like you said, with the huddle, you're not in a situation to where you can regroup and, say, hey, this is what we want to run out of this. You can't. There was no huddle there. And so they looked lost against the press. They had a couple of really, just for lack of a better term, terrible turnovers in the open court, just passing between guards or trying to kick out, back out to reset the offense. And it turned into easy Georgia looks or fouls to get to the line. And you can't have that when teams are getting open court opportunities against you. You saw it against Florida, and then you saw it again against Georgia, where these open court opportunities, they just suck the life out of you. And because they lead to big dunks and they lead to the crowd, especially on the road, really getting into the game. And you just have these missed opportunities. And when you're doing that and you know that you're turning the ball over a ton, South Carolina started to rush some shots, and it led to bad looks. And then if they didn't get the offensive rebound, sometimes they were able to come back, and Hayden Brown got a stick pack. And I mean, he was fantastic. And I know we want to talk a little bit about him, but you if you can't get the stick pack, then all of a sudden it's an empty offensive possession. And then Georgia's coming down and getting to the free throw line. And then you're taking another rush shot, trying to just make something happen. And that's that connectivity that Lamont Paris has talked about, where a bad defensive possession bleeds over into the offense, and then you end up trying to hit a 10-point shot, and it's not there, and then you miss it, and then all of a sudden they're coming back down, and the game doesn't stop for you, and so they're attacking again. And good old experienced teams smell blood in the water and attack. And Georgia, they're not the most uber talented team on the planet, but they have some older guys on it, and they smell blood in the water, and they went, and you got the result. And I do want to say this too, because we have a question about officiating. We'll probably get to officiating later. The most glaring microcosm of the game in terms of just missed opportunities, they had a chance to win it in regulation. You get that open court opportunity. You had Zach Davis right there. He tries to go up for it and just can't hold on to it. And buzzer sounds, no shot. You play a good defensive possession. You just have either a physical or a mental error, whatever that turned out to be, with Zach there at the end. And then you go to overtime, and Georgia had been playing better the last 5 or 6 minutes of the regulation, and then they were the better team in overtime. And you saw that stuff, and man, it's a game that the margins are so small for this team to win in league play. And you had it all right there for you down the stretch, and you just let it slip through your fingers. And at the end of the season, this is not an NIT team, not an NCAA tournament team, but you're going to look back and say, man, if only we got that one, or that's one of the ones that kind of got away from us. And, to help the overall record, if you're sitting at, whatever that win total is, it could have been better by one game at minimum, just because you let that Georgia game slip away.
Yeah, absolutely. And one thing I did want to touch on is Josh Gray. Josh Gray, Lamont talked about, his progression in the Collyn show, and it was kind of funny. I tweeted about it. During his Collyn show, Lamont Paris took a straw poll at Columbia Craft, I believe they're located at. And he was like, raise your glass if you think Josh Gray should start. And I believe he did, right? Yes, Josh Gray started, right?
I believe. Yeah. Yes, he did.
Yeah. So Josh Gray started. I think, Lamont was talking about how, his progression has come along. He's just still, not to say immature as a person, but immature as a basketball player. He needs to learn and grow and be in situations, because he is a legit 7-footer. He's all that and more. And Lamont had called him a Greek Adonis, if you will. And so Josh Gray is a very talented. He needs to get more reps, and his progression is going to be a little slower than Gigi's, if you will. But I was impressed with what I saw from Josh Gray. It's going to take a little bit of time to get him to where you would want him to be as you're starting 7-footer dominant force in the paint. But I was pretty impressed from what I saw from him. I think it's his first start, but yeah, I mean, lot from Josh Gray there. And I mean, I guess going back to some of the negatives, because there are plenty in this game, but the turnovers. Yeah. Oh my goodness, the turnovers. 18 total turnovers for South Carolina, and Georgia had 11, but
they were bad turnovers. It wasn't like you were trying to do something fun or like you were, you just got your pocket picked from a good play. It was just bad passing, lazy passing. And like you said, when it leads to open court opportunities, those are the ones that kill you, those pick sixes, if you will.
Yeah, absolutely.
And Josh had 2 of those. I'll kind of touch on Josh a little bit too, but he had 2. I don't know if he's a guy right now that you dump the ball to in the paint and he goes 1 dribble, 2 dribbles, turns around and lays it in. I don't know if he can do that 10 to 12 times a game just yet. But from a rebounding standpoint, he ranks 3rd in the SEC in offensive rebound rate. He ranks 8th in SEC play in defensive rebound rate, 9th in block rate. He's really coming along. Still turns the ball over way too much. You'd like to see him get to the line a little bit more, and he did in his last 2 games against Auburn and Florida. He didn't against Georgia, but you just he needs to cut down on the turnovers. He looks like he's rushing it sometimes offensively, and you kind of see that with some of the turnovers, but he's getting a lot better on the rebounding end. He's protecting the rim a lot better without fouling as much. He's just kind of slowly developed into something that's really helped him, and it's really helping this team at times. And he's someone that he played his high school ball 4 years at 4 different schools. He goes to LSU, transfers after a year. This is the first time really in his semi-adult life where he's been the same place for a year and a half, 2 years. But he goes and he comes to play for Frank Martin, and you have a coaching change. So now he's learning an entirely new system that's a little bit more guard heavy, and he's had to adjust to that. They want their bigs to be able to move a little bit more in space, and Josh he's not that guy right now. I think he needs to play more minutes. I think he needs to get more touches. But the problem is that from a development standpoint, is Josh ready for that? Is Josh ready to take the jump from 20 to 25 minutes a game to 30 and be that guy consistently? And we don't know because we're not in practice. We're not in meetings, but he's a guy that probably deserves to play more. They're better with him on the court, but it's just a matter of if he's ready mentally and physically to do something like that.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And that, I mean, we can get back to Georgia and kind of wrap up everything from there in one of our last segments. But I mean, migrating into some better news,
Yes.
Our women's basketball team is still number 1. Blew out Alabama today. It was a little closer than usual for Dawn, if you will, 65-52. But I mean, Alabama's one of the better teams that they've played all year. And they didn't necessarily look like world beaters. I mean, they still look like the number 1 overall ranked team, but I mean, the stats haven't been as big and as wider of a margin against the other team than we've seen. So lot to dissect from this game, Collyn.
Yeah, and it's one of those, we say slow starts, quote unquote, but like they get when they especially go on the road, they're getting the teams quite literally their best shot. Like that team's ready to go. The crowd's into it. This is the number 1 team in the country. And yeah, South Carolina's played in these games. They've done this before, but that other team's amped up and they're ready to go. And you get starts like you've seen this team have on the road at times, and, leading by 2 at the end of the first quarter, then they're up by 7 at halftime. And then it wasn't like there was some crazy run where they were like, oh, they went on like a 16-0 run and boom, it was over. It was just kind of boa constrictor that they just were the better team. South Carolina never trailed. They didn't shoot they shot a ton of threes, which we talked to Chris Walbaum last week, and he's like, they need to be a better 3-point shooting team, but they need to be selective and take the right threes. And you shot 8 of 23 from deep. You only shot 9 free throws, but you did force 8. You only turned the ball over 8 times. You out rebounded them by 11. You had 8 more offensive rebounds, 26 second chance points. That's what good teams are kind of built to do. Like when you're not shooting the ball all that well, can you play defense and can you find other ways to steal possessions? And I mean, when you talk about 20 offensive rebounds turning into 26 second chance points, that's really good. You get 35 from your bench with, Breezy Hall going for 18, hitting 4 of 8 threes. And Aaliyah obviously was Aaliyah, but it's just sometimes you just need to have those boa constrictor games where the other team never leads it might be close at times, but at the end of the day, you look up and you win by 13 on the road against a really good SEC team. I say really good, but like you're up by as much as 16. And once you kind of make that separation, the game never really feels in doubt. And that's what South Carolina did. And that's a testament to Dawn and getting herself ready to go, because it's really, I mean, she's got a doggone good team right now.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And I think, games like these are going to be, the closest thing we see to a loss, if you will. Like, in terms of what Dawn is telling her team, like, that's about as close to a loss as you're going to get. And, we talk about some of these teams needing a loss to kind of have a gut check, if you will. Well, I think that game in and of itself is a gut check for this team. And I think also, too, this shows, you're right, Collyn, like, although you were leading throughout, it does take some toughness to, even when you're not shooting the best and, you've got a tough environment on the road, it's what kind of team are you when, you're up against it? Can you, take it to the finish line? And I mean, this team with all this talent, they sure as hell did that. And, you're right. Big game from Aaliyah, which no surprise there.
Yeah,
She's fighting off double teams. Yeah, we like Aaliyah. She's typical double again. And I mean, no surprises. And so, I mean, this team, they shot 38%, which isn't bad, but also isn't great. It's not necessarily like them. 55.6% from free throw. I'm sure Dawn was pissed about that in some way.
I only think 9 attempts too. He only got to the line 9 times.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, 5 from 9 from the free throw line. And so, yeah, Dawn, I'm sure was number one pissed at the refs, but also pissed at her team that, they were not getting fouls and converting. But I mean, yes, still got the job done. Still going to be the number one ranked team in the country. And, look, coming up, they do have, a tougher schedule in the SEC. LSU obviously on the horizon on Super Bowl Sunday. Wellbaum talked about that last week. You've got Kentucky, UConn on Super Bowl Sunday, I believe, right? Or is it?
No,
it is LSU.
Yeah, LSU, and you got a Kentucky team that played you close at Rupp, and you ended up pulling away really late to win by a pretty significant margin. But then you got at UConn, and UConn's a shell of what it normally is at times, just because they've been dealt with so many injuries. But it's still UConn. Like, Gino's a fantastic coach. And then you got at Auburn, which Auburn's not, they're not a great team, but you're on the road. Then you get the big one. Then that's the game, LSU coming to Columbia on Super Bowl Sunday. I mean, that's your appetizer. The Super Bowl kicks off at, I guess 6:30, 7, something like that.
7-ish.
You got that 2 p.m. window. It's right there. So that'll be so much fun to watch that one. And if they can make it through that unscathed without taking a loss, which they'll be favorites in every single one of those games.
Oh, yeah.
You start having the conversation. Can this team go undefeated? And right now, I mean, if I gave you South Carolina versus the field to win a national championship, who are you taking?
South Carolina.
Yeah, I mean, at this point, like, they've been the best team in the country. They are the best team in the country. They'd be favored on a neutral court against every single team in Division I basketball right now. And you start having that conversation, especially if they can get past LSU unscathed. We're having it now, but you're really talking about it at that point with 4 league games left to go after LSU, and then you go to the SEC tournament where you only have to win. I guess that's 3 games in 3 days.
It's a bye, yeah. And
then you go to the NCAA tournament, so you could be legitimately having those conversations happen as they near the SEC tournament, and especially once they get into the NCAA tournament, if they make it through unscathed, obviously. That's the big thing. You have to continue to win.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's obviously the goal is to continue winning. And like I said, I think games like Bama are the gut checks that this team is getting. And I'm sure Don is very vocal and has been giving him a little bit of noise in the locker room. But I mean, yeah, you're right, Collyn. I think, LSU is going to be the biggest test of this season. They might see him again in the SEC championship game, but again, that's a neutral court, so it's different. But also too, I think, Wellbaum talked about it a little bit last week. Is the Super Bowl going to play in any factor with, packing Colonial Life? I think there's still going to be a ton of people tapped in, ready to go for that game. And so I think it's going to be really interesting. I think there's been plenty of talk and plenty of motivation for that game, especially on Twitter, with a lot of the LSU fans and throwing things towards
it's gotten
like very inappropriate kind of thing, and just not a very good
Do we know if game day's coming?
That's a good question, actually.
If they get game day, that game's already going to be insane from a hype standpoint. But if they get game day, I mean that place is. I think they've already announced it as a sellout. That place is going to be absolutely just bonkers right now when everything comes to it. So yeah, I can't wait to watch that one. And I love big games in any sport. And when the hype builds around it, and I can't wait. I absolutely can't wait for it.
Yeah, it's going to be fun. And I know the fan base is certainly taken heart and know all about Kim Mulkey and everything going on with that as well. So, I mean, I guess other than LSU, you're right. We kind of touched on that. Want to go to the ad read, and then our special guest can join us?
I think we can make that happen. If you want to throw the ad read in there,
Absolutely.
And then we can make that work and really get on the other side of this and talk some recruiting.
Yeah, let's do it. All right, so our other sponsor today is Taxiety. Taxiety is that certain feeling you get right before doing your taxes, but you don't have to go through it alone. The tax team at Liberty Tax in Irmo, Lexington, and Columbia will walk you through the process, clear up any confusion, and guarantee you'll get the best possible refund or your money back. It's tax time. If you're in a hurry for your refund, call the team at Liberty Tax. Fast, accurate, and guaranteed. On the other hand, if you think you might be owing Uncle Sam, talk to the Liberty Tax team to make sure you're not paying more than you should owe. They'll find every possible deduction for you. Locally owned and operated, staffed by tax professionals from your neighborhood, open 9 to 9 on weekdays and 9 to 5 on Saturdays. Multiple service options. Start through the Liberty Tax mobile app or through the desktop portal. Make an appointment or just walk in. Give a call to upload your tax documents, and when you come in, your return will be ready to review and sign. You can reach them at 803-462-5576. That is 803-462-5576. As we are joined by our good friend, Mr. Jamie Shaw from On3. Jamie, how we doing, big dog?
What's up, guys? How y'all doing?
Jamie, I appreciate the company manness in both of us because I got the
there you go.
the On3 hoodie, you're in the On3 hat. We are as company men gets right now.
Hey, there it is.
They don't give the intern any swag. Jamie, good to have you on, boss.
Dude, those hoodies are A+ too, man. Those things
they're
are
so comfortable. I wear mine out constantly. I mean, that thing is nonstop. Both of them ready to go.
I do as well.
Yeah. All right, Joe, what you got for our distinguished guest so we can get back to watching football?
Yes. So I guess, Jamie, starting off with the 2023 recruiting class for Lamont Paris and the Gamecocks, I guess, what are your impressions of it, and what are some bright spots, some other targets that they can go get? Just kind of give us a rundown of what you're seeing and what Lamont could bring in next year.
Well, it looks like so far with the 23 class, they got a couple local guys who have upside, who want to be Gamecocks, which is a huge thing. Arden Conyers, 6'6", long, athletic, and can shoot the ball. Collyn Murray Boyles is a little bit more. He's about 6'7", and he's kind of more of a power forward. He's got a unique game, an unorthodox kind of cadence to his game, but he's uber productive. He's tough, and all that type of stuff. Things that you want to bring to a team. Are these two guys that can carry a program? They're not, but they're great pieces, especially to grow with. If you're seeing this out 3, 4, 5 years out, you bring it in an Arden Conyers who has tools to build on, to grow on, that might not be available year one, but by year three, as a 21-year-old with about 20, 35 more pounds on and all that type of stuff, his ability to shoot, his length, his athleticism really look good as an SEC type of player. Same kind of thing with Collyn Murray-Boyles. Now, he's been unbelievable this year with Wasatch. He's gone out there, been a double-double machine playing on the NIBC, which is kind of an elite level league within the high school basketball world, out at Wasatch Academy in Pleasant Grove, Utah. He's really kind of just efficient. Nothing, no glitz, no glam, a meat and potatoes type of a double-double every single time out. He's got touch, left-handed, good rebounder, has a nose for the ball. And he's just a good player.
And I was talking to a staff member the other week because they can actually talk about these guys now. And he even mentioned about Collyn, just the guys that don't need to score and don't have to score first are the guys that tend to help you more early on in their careers. And Collyn seems to be that kind of guy. And Jamie, you know as well as I do how important he was when South Carolina got here. This staff got here to get him in the boat before he went out to Wasatch. What would his recruitment have looked like if he didn't commit over the summer and he's having the season he did now while still being potentially uncommitted?
Well, it was interesting because, I mean, South Carolina took Collyn at the time of, I think his next biggest offers were maybe SMU and St. Bonaventure at the time he committed. I mean, you would have to think with the numbers he's been putting up that a whole lot of schools at the level of South Carolina would have gotten involved. It would have been interesting to have watched, though, because he was hurt throughout the summer. He had a little bit excess weight on, wasn't playing at 100% of what he could do throughout the summer. So he was up and down. And then this season, there hadn't really been a ton of coaches on the road recruiting, focusing on their own team and all that type of stuff, and going to see the guys that they've already got in tow. So it would have been interesting to see. His play has absolutely warranted the high major stuff, top 100 rank, all that type of stuff. His play is warranted. Now, would he have garnered more? You would think that he would have, but it would have been interesting to have seen.
Yeah. And right now he's listed in the On3 rankings as the number 114 player in the country. He is 139 in the On3 consensus rankings, which is a kind of a conglomerate of all of them. Jamie, I know we both kind of talked to people around the industry, and we know South Carolina is going to be really portal heavy probably in this upcoming offseason. But what's kind of next for this for this 2023 class? The Freudian slip there of On3 just because it's our network.
We're company men.
Yeah, we're company men.
We're trying to keep it in the minds.
Yeah,
slide in there.
When you look at what could happen, as you look at decommits always happen, dudes obviously reclassify. Like Gigi, do you anticipate South Carolina being involved if the right situation popped up with a high school kid that maybe decommits, gets out of a letter of intent, or potentially wants to reclassify?
Absolutely. They'll I think at this point in time, the staff isn't closed off to anything. They're going to explore options. As you know, for example, Mike Bray just announced that he was going to retire at the end of the season. Well, he's had two guys have already requested out, Parker Fredrickson and Brady Dunlop. I wouldn't be surprised if they had reached out just to kind of gauge things. Not necessarily that they're going to move, whatever the case, just to kind of gauge where things are at, where their heads are at with those type of guys. And as we continue to move forward in this process, there will be more coaching changes. There'll be more people to possibly ask out, and there could be some people that pop up. It was around this time last year that a guy like a Leonard Miller last year really kind of took off. He ended up going to the G League, but he was unranked at this point in time. At this time last year, ended up number 2 overall in the On3 rankings. So guys pop up. There'll be some foreign guys. I'm sure there's going to be some Canadian guys. I'm sure there's going to be some postgraduate guys. I'm sure that pop up. Now, as to whether or not they get in, they get in with them to remain to be seen. But I don't think they'll close off the doors to any one avenue just yet.
Yeah, and it's funny. People always ask me on the Insiders Forum and this is a good way to segue to the 2024 class, but everyone asks me, well, would they take Cam Scott and KJ Green and Elijah Crawford if they all wanted to say yes? And I said, they're not in the position right now to turn down good players that want to come play for this university. And if you get 3 dudes who are all ranked in the top 100, I think in both on-threes and the on-3 consensus rankings, you don't say no to that if you're Lamont Paris and the staff. But Jamie, you see these dudes a lot more than we do. Just what's your take on South Carolina's efforts in the 2024 class, and how important is it to close on, statistically speaking, they're not going to close on every single one of the guys that they're going after, but how important is it to get across the finish line with some of these priority guys in 2024 especially?
Well, it's always a big thing whenever you're able to get talent on the roster, especially if you're a new staff, new coach trying to build something there. It's always huge to get talent on the roster. Now, they're at a point where there are 3 guys that are nationally ranked in the top 100 who have deep South Carolina ties, whether they're in the state currently or from the state or whatever the case. And they're all 3 have been receptive to the staff. There's a long way to go in the 2024 class. There's a long way to go with the recruiting process. Cam, I think, is maybe his process might be a little bit further along. He's I think stated Marchish, end of February, early March timeframe. For now, that could continue to go because earlier it was January, and then the Texas stuff happened, and then back to February, and then now it's February, March. So things could continue to happen as new schools come in for him. I don't think KJ and Elijah are necessarily close to making a decision. Theirs could go throughout the summer. Maybe you see a list narrow, and then visits and all that type of stuff happen throughout the summer, and then on into August, September, October. But back to your question, yes, it's huge. I mean, to have local guys, it's good to get talent on the roster at any point in time, no matter where they're from. But to get the local guys, it could be a kick in the butt to kind of kickstart the where things are going.
Yeah, and I'll let Joe jump in a second. But you've seen when South Carolina's been really good, they've had that run of in-state dudes that come in. Jamie, I know you were around and watched a lot of that 97 SEC championship team with BJ and with, I guess what Larry Davis was a South Carolina kid that transferred in from, and then you had Melvin Watson. And I was at South Carolina when, Sin, PJ, and Justin Mackey were taking that team to the Final Four, and those were all South Carolina kids. So when this program's had high-level success, it's usually been with South Carolina guys on it, and those guys were all priorities. Joe, what do you got for the GOAT in basketball recruiting? Him and Joe took them both.
Oh yeah, the absolute GOAT in recruiting. The only man that is, to be trusted. Mr. Jamie Shaw. Jamie, I guess I do have like a Lamont question, if you will. Just kind of like what are you seeing from Lamont early on, and like what are his strengths as a recruiter, and I guess what are his weaknesses with this first year South Carolina program?
I think it's easy to say a strength that he has is his I guess ability to build relationships. Like he's a very personal person, and he's able to kind of take your guard down and just sit down and talk with you, and build and do all that. Kind of make you feel very comfortable being around him. I guess something that they need to work on is closing. You can build the relationships all you want and get in there, and you can have your hat on the table. But if the kids don't come, it's not there. So I think that there's a medium there to be had to build the relationships and then get in and close, and that's just going to take time with it. But I think another positive that he shows that I've heard a lot actually out talking to kids on the recruiting trail is the freedom that he's given his players to go out and play and make mistakes and play through mistakes and continue to get positive reinforcement out of them. So I think there are a lot of positives, at least in the eyes of recruiting and recruits and families of potential student athletes that to be had
Yeah, it's one thing to get put in the graphic in your top 5, and then another thing for it to be the breaking news. South Carolina lands X, Y, and Z, and that's been the issue with in-state talent the last couple cycles for the most part. So, Jamie, you know as well as I do, recruiting is a marathon, and it's great when you get to mile 25, but you got to get to 26.2 at the end of it. So, Joe, what else you got for our boy? Let him go.
Yeah, Jamie, I guess one final question. It's a quickie, and then, I mean, the time is yours. Feel free to talk about whatever you've got for us. Any news, anything basketball related, we'd love to hear it. But I guess what significance does Gigi and like where he goes in the draft, what significance does that play in recruiting? And I guess what does that do, and how much of a selling point is that for Lamont?
It depends. Gigi came in, he was the number 1 player in 2023. Had he stayed in 2023, he probably would have been in the conversation for the 2024 number 1 overall pick. I don't know that anybody would have had a shot at 2023 with Wembanyama and Scoot, but that class following up, Gigi probably would have been the early favorite for number 1 overall. So he chose to become the youngest player, draft eligible player, the youngest player on every mock draft, having just turned 17 about a month ago, or just turned 18 about a month ago. So now he's playing through his entire freshman season, half of it as a 17-year-old and the other half as an early 18-year-old. So to answer your question, I think high-level prospects will look at the GGs, the guys that are surefire one and dones.
Yeah.
I don't necessarily know that unless the situation's exactly right, how many of those type of guys the staff's looking to recruit. Obviously, within the 2023 class, they locked up 2 guys that are probably going to be around for multiple years, 2, 3, 4 years, and develop and get into the system and learn and develop their bodies and develop their games, and all that type of stuff. And it feels like that is the way that the staff wants to go, with some, I don't want to say quick hitter, but with some portal stuff mixed in, with some guys that can have, a 1-year Band-Aid through the portal, but also 2, 3-year guys. If you see this last class they took, they had the Hayden Brown, who's got 1 year left, but they also took the Verdonk, and they took Michi, who got multiple years, and everything left on the table too. So I think they'd like to have guys in their system for multiple years so they can learn and teach and grow that way. So all of that long-winded answer back to the Gigi thing, it will always help if he stays in the top 10, Gigi, if he gets drafted in the top 10. He was projected to be in the top 10. He was projected all that type of stuff. If Gigi continues to go into the top 10, I think that things will be okay. If he doesn't go into the top 10, there'll probably be a couple of, a month or so of bad news or whatnot, but I don't think it would necessarily stick. But him going in the top 10 lottery, I think would be fine.
All right, Jamie, we're going to put you on the spot. If there's anything you want to talk about South Carolina related, if there's anything college basketball related, if there's anything South Carolina football related, we know you like to talk a little bit about the football program. So the floor is yours, sir. Have at it.
Oh, no, nothing wild and crazy. We'll be releasing our 2023 updated basketball rankings next Monday. So a week from tomorrow will be the 2023 update. So make sure that you stay tuned and look out for that. Collyn Murray Boyles, we'll see where he goes, if he goes up or down or stays the same or what happens with him. But yeah, no, stay tuned. Make sure that you stay watching Gamecock Central. Obviously, the best Gamecock news throughout the country, throughout the whole thing. Collyn's got a beat on the basketball better than anybody else out there in the market. And Intern Joe's a rising star. So make sure that you stay in touch with the Gamecock Central stuff and On 3 and everything like that. So
a company man through and through. Where did I end up in the rankings?
Where did you end up in the rankings?
Yeah. Where am I?
You were the last 4 out.
Oh, I respect it. It's just setting up for a big NIT run. That's right.
Well, no, I mean, I feel like you're a 6'3" center.
Yeah,
I mean, there's some versatility there. I mean, you're not afraid to throw your body around. But what's your long-term projection?
Yeah, right. Got to cut the weight, got to get in the weight room a little bit more and be done with it. So,
yeah, so make sure you follow us, guys. On3.com is the overall on thing. So if you have any questions, at Jamie Shaw 5 on Twitter, don't be afraid to follow and ask me a question.
Absolutely. Well, Jamie, we can't thank you enough. Get back to watching some football and having some family time on a nice little Sunday night here.
It's all rankings, man. No football, no TV. Look, TV's not even on.
Boom. There. I understand it, man. Hey, Jamie.
Thank you, Jamie.
Can't thank you enough, buddy.
All right, guys.
Appreciate it. That was
Now,
Jamie Shaw.
Yeah.
Our
was
On3 national recruiting insider, the man, the myth, the legend. Couldn't have gone any better.
And it's a good segue from talking about recruiting to kind of what we wanted to talk about next, which is just what's next for this hoops team. I mean, you're talking about a team with, I guess you're right near that halfway point in league play. I think you have 10 more games left. So after Tuesday's game, you'll be halfway through. What's next for this team? How do you kind of evaluate these last 10 games of lost seasons? Probably not the right word, but a season where you're in transition, and it's a season about kind of taking your lumps before, if you're Lamont Paris and this fan base, you hope things continue to improve.
Yeah, I mean, I guess in terms of like what's next, you have to put up a good showing against, Alabama and Tennessee. Both, they're the two biggest games left on your schedule. So you have to put up a fight against those two teams to kind of show, because the blowouts are really, getting old for recruits and obviously for the guys too. It definitely damages the morale. And I mean, as much as Georgia does too, you lose a close one like that, it definitely doesn't help. But I mean, I think in terms, it's just like you got to shoot the ball better. And I don't want to say guys are going out there and playing for themselves. Like, you still need to play as a team, but playing as a team will lift each other up. Guys will play better if you play as a team. And so from here on out, it really is just kind of about just being able to improve your brand, improve the brand of South Carolina men's basketball, and try to, finish this season with some kind of positive light. The Kentucky win was something you can really, tip your hat to and everything in one shining moment. But I mean, down the stretch, you really have a chance to kind of turn things around. It starts with Mississippi State, then you've got Arkansas, a really, really talented team, Missouri and Ole Miss and Vanderbilt. And then you hit, Alabama and Tennessee on the road. Those two, like I said, those are your two toughest games of the schedule. So you kind of have to win some of these down games. And like I said, Arkansas is going to be a tough test too, but Mississippi State's going to be a good one. You really, really have to play them well. And then Arkansas, again, they're coming to your building as well as Mississippi State. But I mean, you got two home games before you go on the road at Missouri and Ole Miss. You have to put up a good showing in front of the home crowd fans and get a little bit of that home cooking. Really kind of get back to your roots and, better defense. Like I said, Collyn, the thing that pisses me off the most about this team is the backdoor cuts, because it really is something that's there week to week. And, Lamont is trying to fix it. Lamont's probably even more pissed off than I am about it. But, I think you got to tighten up on defense and put together a really good showing to kind of turn the tide for the rest of the season. Although you're probably not going to make the NIT, and that's kind of out of the way, you just have to do something, put up a better effort to make this season worth it, right? And not just have it be the Kentucky win in the G.G. Jackson season,
Right. And that's the frustrating part about this team, is that you do end up having G.G. Jackson on it, and you're not able to make some hay really in the SEC. And the roster's just not to the depth perspective, talent-wise, to be able to compete night in and night out. But I hate to liken it to football, but this is an SEC school, and sometimes it's easy to liken things to football. And you kind of want it to be similar to that Shane Beamer first year, where you go out and you lose, 4 of 6 at some point. You lose to Georgia, you lose to Kentucky. Your wins are against Troy and Vanderbilt in that stretch, with smackdowns at Tennessee, with smackdowns at Texas A&M, where you just don't look competitive. But then you go in and you win against Florida, you beat Auburn, and then you go out and beat North Carolina in a bowl. I mean, that helps, and that gives you some momentum. And South Carolina is not going to go out. You wouldn't pick them to go beat Alabama at home or Tennessee on the road. But can you pull off a win against Mississippi State, a team that's not been great in SEC play, but started the year off really strong? Can you go to Missouri, a team that just beat Iowa State and look competitive and maybe pull out a win? Can you go, beat Ole Miss at Ole Miss, a team that you should have been more competitive against first time around? Can you go beat Vanderbilt when they come here? Those are probably the most likely, but you're starting to run out of games to show progress in. You only got 10 plus at least one in the conference tournament, and that's what you got to do. You have to show proof of concept to then take to the transfer portal, along with, being able to help market some NIL opportunities for guys and say, hey, this is what we can do. We've shown you the apex of this. When we're at our best, we can go beat Kentucky at Kentucky. We can beat a Clemson team that's near the top of the ACC right now, a down ACC, but the ACC. Georgetown's not good, but we were down double digits at one point and came back and won that game in overtime. We beat a Western Kentucky team that, probably on paper is more talented than the South Carolina team top to bottom as you look at it. We beat these teams, and we can get you there. So you have to show proof of concept, and it starts on the defensive end. I mean, in SEC games, so in 8 SEC games, South Carolina ranks last in defensive efficiency, in effective field goal percentage, in opponent 2-point percentage, in opponent block rate. They're 13th in opponent turnover percentage, in opponent offensive rebounding, in opponent 3-point shooting percentage, and non-steal turnovers. They're just a bad defensive team right now, and the numbers bear that out. And you got to show some improvement there. I'm not saying they're going to go from being ranked 14th to being ranked, 7th. But can you put together more consistent defensive showings? And oddly enough, the Georgia game was their best defensive game. I'm looking at it in league play, period. The only one that's been better since was that Eastern Michigan game. So can you take some of what you did against Georgia, build on it, and do that again against Mississippi State? A Mississippi State team, too, that's a really good defensive team, but ranks 13th in offensive efficiency.
Mm-hmm.
Can you do that? And if you can improve offensively, or not offensively, defensively, because this team's kind of tied together, then you might get a little bit more offensive success when it comes to it. But Joe, I'll ask you, 10 games left in SEC play, with one in the SEC tournament at least, depending on how things go.
Yeah.
They're going to be underdogs in every single one of their games remaining. I don't think that's a shock. But of the 10 remaining regular season games, where do you see maybe the 2 or 3 most likely wins for South Carolina, as our genius prognosticators that we are?
Yeah, absolutely. Obviously Mississippi State, because they are down in the bottom half of the SEC. There are 4 teams that are 1-7 in conference, and that's Mississippi State, LSU, and Ole Miss. And South Carolina plays all 4 or all 3 of them. And so, I think if you're looking at it for 2 teams that I really think are must wins, I think, Mississippi State, that's at home, and you have them twice. You go to Mississippi State at one of the very end of the game, or very end of the season games. You're at LSU and you're at Ole Miss. I think those 2 games will really show, how you can play a bad team on the road. I think they showed with Georgia that they can, play with teams on the road, and obviously with Kentucky too. You can play up to teams' levels on the road. So I think, I don't know. Personally, I think it's the Mississippi State game coming up at home. You got to win, like I said. So you got to get some home cooking going, and then I think it's at LSU on February 18th, because LSU, that game comes right before Alabama and right before Tennessee. So that game is going to be, if you get blown out in that game, it's going to be even worse for Alabama and Tennessee. And I mean, maybe not, right? Because I mean, the only fear with that is like Alabama's a home game, and they got blown out by Tennessee at home before they went to Kentucky, and then they beat them, right? So it's kind of the flip flop. But I think you need to put up a fight in that game, let alone win it, because going into Alabama, you need all of the morale you can get and more. All of the basketball god luck and everything, combined to you try to win that game or at least keep it close. So those are my two games, Collyn. I'm going to flip it. And I guess, what are your two games that you're really looking ahead to?
Yeah, I mean, of the 10 that are remaining, the Ken Palms analytics give South Carolina the highest percentage left is 33% win percentage. But there's 4 games with a 20% win percentage or better. Mississippi State at 20. Then you have that Vanderbilt game at home at 31. Then you have a 20% chance at LSU. That's on the road. That's why it's low. And then at home to Georgia is at 33%. So if you're looking at most likely wins at this point, it's probably those 4. And I mean, I think if you can just copy and paste, I think they have a strong chance to beat Georgia at home because they were up double digits in the second half, and then the crowd got into it and Georgia got into it, and you do that. Vanderbilt's not a great team. We'll see what that looks like. The South Carolina led against Vanderbilt. That game went to overtime. You never know when they come to South Carolina. Mississippi State's good, not great, not a great offensive team. Yeah. And those are kind of the 4 you look at, because in between that is a talented Arkansas team, a Missouri team that is making a push to make the NCAA tournament. Ole Miss on the road you have a chance to win that one. They're not very good. They've sputtered since beating South Carolina. But then you got Alabama, Tennessee, and then another Mississippi State game on the road. You're probably looking at those 4 as your likeliest scenarios as you kind of get into this back half of league play. So, the Brandon Miller.
Yep. I was gonna bring this comment up because we haven't talked about GG that much. We talked about his performance against UGA a little bit, but not a whole segment devoted to GG tonight, unfortunately. But yeah, I think it will be a really good game. Yeah. As another co-host, Wrigley, joins. Oh my gosh, Collyn, I love that.
Yeah, she decided to come up and join.
Absolutely,
so
I love it.
She's going to hang out here for the Q&A portion of the broadcast.
Yeah. Absolutely. And if you guys don't know Collyn's dog, if you follow him on Twitter, gets posted on Twitter whenever South Carolina basketball gets a little hard to watch. So that the goodest of doggos ever, minus the fact
she's Gamecock basketball support dog, so she'll be the support dog for the Q&A section too.
Absolutely. It sounds awesome. But yeah, unfortunately she's named Wrigley.
Hey, we got Wrigley Field in the background too.
Oh, I love that. That's absolutely great. But yeah, I guess sticking with Gigi, in terms of Brandon, that game against Brandon Miller, like I'm also very, very, very excited about it. It's going to be really, really, really good. And I think my notes from UGA, he really hasn't done like a whole lot. Like obviously we had a whole segment devoted to him because he dropped 30. But I guess for my notes on GG for UGA is that Collyn, we talked about it in episode 1 was like, he has to get those steals and blocks to kind of get his momentum going. And that's what I saw in the first half is like, he was able to get a couple steals, a couple blocks, and then really start to run and go with it and get himself involved, like 12 points in the first half, I believe. And so I was impressed with that. And he's, moving. It's another stage in the development for him. And we saw that a little bit with Florida. Again, Florida wasn't pretty for anybody. So, yeah.
Yeah, he just needs to be more efficient. He's getting to the free throw line, that was his next step. He's getting to the free throw line. But, you look at, Auburn was great, but since then, 20 points on 18 shots, which is not great. And then 18 points on 19 shots against Georgia. He's turned the ball over 11 times in 3 games, 9 of those coming, 7 against Georgia, 9 in the last 2 to just 5 assists. He's getting his rebounds, which is great. He's getting his steals, but need to be more efficient. And then you need to be you need to be able to protect the ball a little bit more.
Absolutely. Now we can go into our Q&A session. Sorry, we had to talk about, the best player on the team a little bit. Yeah. So I guess our first question from Brandon Kuhn, do you think we get Nick Harbor?
Ooh.
Big question. It is officially Nick Harbor week.
It is officially Nick Harbor week at Gamecock Central. I don't even think Nick knows. Like, I don't. Yeah. I think he's going to decide today or, tonight's Sunday, but Monday or Tuesday, and then have a decision Wednesday. And I think South Carolina Gamecocks right now are the RPM favorite as it sits. I looked earlier today. I will look again. They are the RPM favorite by a whopping 4%. 4.2% favorite over Michigan, 28.3% overall. I got to think that your 3 favorites going into this week are South Carolina, Michigan, and Oregon, just based on all the great reporting Wes Mitchell and Chris Clark have done at Gamecock Central. Maryland's kind of the dark horse because they're the home state school and he's been on campus a ton. And it's just a matter of can they sell him on the track side of things, the NLI side of things, and what that looks like. He's not going to make his decision solely on NIL, but obviously when you're that big of a name coming into a program, that's something you think about. And if you're South Carolina and Michigan, you have a really good thing to sell to them. If you're Oregon, with the Nike aspect of it, with the track aspect of it, and playing football at Oregon, Wes had a great point he made on 107.5, the game in their show that they do from 11 to noon, if I'm not mistaken. I'm on from 9 to 10 on Monday, Wednesday, Friday.
Shout out 107.5 the game.
He made a great point that said, you can literally take those top 4 schools and give a great reason of why he should go there. Yeah. And then a great reason why, I don't know, hold on that. All 4 have legitimately good reasons for it. And this is if you're South Carolina, this is what you want. Big boy recruiting battle against other big boys in the sport. And that's the good stuff. That's what you want to be if you want to take that next step. So I hate the cop-out answer of do you think we get Harbor? But I think South Carolina is one of the 3 favorites going into signing week. And I think that they've made a good push. It'll be interesting to see if they can hold off Oregon, who's obviously pushing hard too. But I think there's reason to feel optimistic if you're South Carolina, but I also think there's reason to hit pause and call a timeout on saying he's fully in the boat, just because Michigan's a really good school, Maryland's the hometown school, and Oregon's Oregon. Yeah,
absolutely. I mean, I loved your point on the big boy recruiting battle. I think if they would happen to lose this thing, it's I guess that's your one takeaway is you were up there for the 5-star guy. You're in the mix for a guy like Nick Harbor. But I mean, personally, I think it's so tough. And you're right. I don't even think Nick knows what he wants to do yet. It's and visiting all these schools. And I mean, Shane was there, for his last in-home visit. So I think that speaks a little bit, that Shane got to talk to his family a little bit. And, he was one of the last people to sit down and meet with the family and everything. And all the coaches did as well. You had Jody Wright there, and who doesn't love Jody Wright? It's very hard not to like Jody Wright. So they clearly sent the A-team with him. And I believe they sent Sterling Lucas too, right?
Yes. Yeah. They've been recruiting because they're going to use him as a two-way guy.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Sterling Lucas is great too. I guess my only fear with this recruiting battle is I don't know, in the Big Ten land and back up north, wherever I'm from, back in South Bendish, when a guy visits a school last, it's usually where he wants to go. And for some reason, him seeing the picture of Birch at the top of the student section and then Nick in the middle of the student section at the basketball game last night. For some reason, it concerned me a little bit. And that's why I think it's more of a toss-up than we think. Like, it might be a 1 or 0.5% lean towards South Carolina. And obviously Wes Mitchell and Chris Clark, God bless them for all the recruiting work they do. They probably know better than I do. But I think there's, maybe a hair of a lean towards South Carolina. And you're right. I don't think Nick knows yet. And nobody will. I don't think anyone, but yeah, it's going to be really fun. It's going to be a really, really fun week. Yeah. And that's what this season's all about, right? Like, we don't have football on, so let's, put all of our chips into a 5-star, just, toying with our feelings and his whole thing that he did with Boulder and all of that. It's the best part, right?
It's silly season for all the right reasons. And I love recruiting just because it's kooky sometimes, man. It's just so kooky. And, I can't wait. Happy Nicholas Harbor week to all who celebrate. And let's see what else we got.
All right, so the next question from T, was that the worst officiating in a men's basketball game you have seen this year in Athens yesterday? I thought it was funny. I had to bring it up. Collyn, what do you think?
I'm not going to go out there and start criticizing officiating or specific officiating. College basketball officiating on the whole is not very good.
Yeah. It's not
Hayden Brown fouling out or coming close to fouling out like he did on one where they said he pushed him wasn't great. He got elbowed in the face and the foul got called on him, I think, too. There were some bad foul calls in that game, and that's just par for the course. I think college basketball officiating holds not all that great top to bottom, and you see a lot of egregious calls in college basketball nowadays, Saturday included in Athens.
Yeah, absolutely. I couldn't agree more. I think, down the stretch, it was a little inconsistent, and I think that's what T's kind of leaning into. And there were a lot of people saying that it was the officiating that kind of lost it. But I mean, personally, in regulation, I don't necessarily think it was the officiating. I think it was the one chance that you had at the very end of the game with Zach Davis. Like, I think that was it. That was the moment. Like, right. I don't necessarily think the game was pinned on any officials there. And I mean, if we're talking about horrible officiating, I mean, I'll let you bring this up, and then we can. I'm going to bring up.
Well, yes, Georgia shot 15 more free throws than South Carolina did, which is obviously glaring. But South Carolina also shot 31 3-pointers to 37 2-pointers. Georgia shot 41 2-pointers to 15 threes. Typically, that's an indication of Georgia being in attack mode a little bit more, not settling for those 3-point shots, which you tend to get fouled more on the 2-pointers than the threes. And I think that speaks somewhat to the disparity, but I do agree that there were some calls that did not look great when you look at South Carolina's end of things.
Yeah, I agree. And I mean, if you're driving to the bucket, you're obviously going to get more calls. And I was going to make a joke about LeBron. The officiating was terrible across the country last night. Mike didn't seem to think so, but I think, hashtag Jason Tatum fouled him.
He did.
He did, very much so. And Mike certainly didn't think so, but that's neither here nor there. I guess the Celtics are the balls, if you will.
Yeah.
Going to our next one. Might have missed it. Can we talk about Josh Gray's possession and change of philosophy? We kind of touched on it earlier. Any closing notes, I guess, just with his progression? And I guess we can close it. There you go here.
Yeah, I think this is a really solid thing for South Carolina to have a more consistent post presence. And if you're Josh, in this business, you stop rooting for teams and because you're so close to them and journalistic integrity and all that, but you do end up rooting for people at times. And Josh is a really nice dude, really smart guy, loves basketball. See him have just even this success and a step up this season. It's good for him, I think. And it's really nice to see Josh having the kind of game, having the kind of stretch he's having right now.
Yeah, I agree. I also am a big fan of Josh Gray. I think, he's kind of a refreshing sight to see out there as like a true 7-footer for this team, where they've struggled even during the Frank Martin days to really get a true 7-footer out there. And I think, Josh Gray can, the stability, right? You talked about it too, Collyn, earlier, the stability. If you can give Josh Gray some stability under Lamont, and I mean, Jamie touched on it too, on how good of a player's coach he is. Like, I think it's awesome for Josh Gray. And I think his development is really going to come along here, especially, down the stretch. You're going to see it a little bit more, and especially into next year. It's going to be really exciting to watch because I think Josh Gray is a fantastic person, good basketball player, and a really true 7-footer. And if he can, kind of get his size together and get better at maneuvering around the rim, he's going to be really, really, really good for this team coming up.
Mm-hmm.
So our last question of the night, do y'all think men's basketball will win another game this year? Looks like their best chance against Georgia at 25% might be time to open up the rotation a little bit. No?
Ryan, that is a very good question. I thank you so much for asking it, Ryan. Thank you, Ryan.
Thank you, Ryan.
I appreciate you, Ryan.
Yes.
Yes, I do think they're going to win at least one more game.
Yeah.
I think just law of averages at some point has to kick in for you. Do you open up the rotation? I think they're playing the guys that are, one game Daniel Hankins Sanford might play more. One day BBV might, but I think they're kind of coming to the core of the 7 to 8 guys that they're gonna really rely on down the stretch here. And that's actually kind of my one worry is that are Hayden and Michi and Gigi and to a degree Chico Carter, are they built to play 30 to 35 minutes a night? And how much will they wear down having to do that? So that's interesting to me on just what that's like having to play. Hayden obviously deals with a lot of foul trouble, but Michi's being asked to play 30. Gigi, same thing. Chico to a degree as well. So great question, Ryan, and I appreciate you asking.
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, I think they're going to get one more game.
Yeah.
Maybe just one. I don't know.
Law of averages has to kick in at some point.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think if another thing I noticed from Georgia that I didn't bring up is and a stat that I heard on the broadcast was Chico Carter's leading the SEC in 3-point percentage.
He's been great.
Yeah, let him shoot the ball more. Honestly, I think that's one thing that this team is missing that I probably should have brought up when we were talking about what this team has to do down the stretch. Give Chico the ball. And shout out Chico because he's in my hip-hop media and society class. So shout out Chico for that. It must be the class, right? That's leading to his great shooting. But I mean,
100%. And he's hitting 45.5% of his threes in SEC play, 15 of 33. Now, with Chico, he's not a guy that we've seen yet really be able to create his own shot.
Mm-hmm.
He has to rely on a lot of in the flow of the offense, corner threes, top of the key threes, flowing kind of with the right shot. So it'll be interesting to see if they give him more opportunity to create, if he can do that, or what that might look like in terms of running more stuff to get him an open look in the corner, to get him some open looks where he feels comfortable. Because I agree with you that he's actually, when you look at nationally over the course of the entire season, he's top 15 nationally in 3-point percentage, 48.9%. So really talented shooter. They brought him in last year to be a really talented shooter, and just the defense never really worked out for him to be on the court for long stretches. But he can shoot, and I think South Carolina has to really try to, get him some more easier looks so he can really showcase that.
Yeah, kid certainly has a clip for sure.
Mm-hmm.
All right, everybody. Thank you for tuning in.
Hey, we got one more.
Oh, yeah, that's right. Ashley,
we want to make sure we get as many questions in as we can.
Absolutely. All right. So Ashley's question, how much of being able to play with Spencer Rattler would Nick factor into his decision? Like Beamer says, good players like to play with other good players. Collyn, floor is yours.
I think it plays into a degree somewhat. I think Spencer Rattler has gone into, I think he's reached out to Harbor. I think they've talked about it. But let's be honest here too. You bring Rattler back thinking that this is going to be his last year at South Carolina, more than likely. You hope that Rattler has a good enough year to go pro. If you're Harbor, you're also thinking about that, where it's yes, Spencer's going to be here as a freshman if I come in, but who knows how long he's going to be here. He's certainly not going to finish his career. I'm not going to, we're not going to finish our careers together. So does it play a part? Yes, but Harbor's going to be here, potentially 2 or 3 years longer than Spencer Rattler is, depending on how everything shakes out. So I think it plays somewhat of a part, but I think if you're Rattler, you sell more of the offense, the NIL aspect of it because Rattler's done really well with that. You sell that stuff to it about being the big man on campus, about being the guy, and then what he's heard from Dowell Loggins and how much that played into his return. I think that's what Rattler sells you on, more so than maybe playing together, even though you would for a year if Harbor were to come to South Carolina.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's what I was going to touch on, Collyn. You kind of took the words out of my mouth. Just like the NIL and like the big man on campus thing, right? And like, because Spencer Rattler was about as big as a name in college football when he committed. Like, we both, and I mean, the rest of the fan base saw, what happened when he committed and how Twitter lit up and how all the cameras just all of a sudden turned to South Carolina. And so I think he's a big selling point in like what star power can be at South Carolina. And like, yes, they're not going to be playing together for that long. Like, he will be playing his freshman year. And I would assume Nick Harper is going to see the field his freshman year, especially at tight end and defensive end, two positions of need. But yeah, I think Spencer's a really good selling point on, this is what you can be. And obviously, like the freshman isn't going to get the biggest NIL check, but I mean, by the time Spencer's gone, the money's going to be there too. That will be a lot of NIL money needed to be distributed.
He sold Gigi on it. He helped sell Gigi on the NLI stuff.
Exactly.
So yeah, I think that's a big aspect to it, but more so than maybe, hey, let's play together for 3 or 4 years, because that's just not how eligibility works. So that's what I think we are.
Yes, Ashley, I apologize for not for
I got you.
About the question.
I got you, Ashley. Don't worry.
Collyn's got you. That's why he's the godfather of greatness, the man, the myth, the legend. Collyn Taylor. Yes, absolutely. But yes, that is it, everybody. Thank you for tuning in. As always, I'm Intern Joe. That's Collyn Taylor. Join us next week. We will have another show for you. Ready to go. Thanks for tuning in.